Okay, this is the last part of our absolutism discussion, and I probably should say lecture because no one's responding back to me. And it's on absolute Russia. Now, what makes Russia so unique is that most of the absolute rulers spend and focus their energies on westernizing Russia. So it's not putting on cowboy boots or cowboy hats. It's making Russia more like the rest of Western Europe. Now you know that Russia is the largest country in the world and it spans across both Europe and Asia. The Ural Mountains right here are the usual dividing point between Europe and Asia. The majority of Russians live on the European side over here. This is just very frozen, cold, not very hospitable territories, but people do live there. But the majority of the people live over here in Eastern Europe. So, Russia, if you remember from your summer reading, it was under the control of the Mongols up until really until like Ivan the Great. He finally got the last of the Mongols out of Russia. The Mongols were slowly falling before that, but that's what makes him so great. Is he got the last of the Mongols out in the 1500s, and um, when he passes away, his grandson Ivan the Terrible becomes the ruler. Well, eventually becomes the ruler, and then you may have read in your summer work that Ivan the Terrible kills his unborn grandchild after beating his daughter in law because she was only wearing 3 of the 7 layers that women would wear on a hot summer day, and she was pregnant. So, again, she only had 3 layers of clothing on, and he felt that this was inappropriate. So, he beat her, causing her to miscarry. And when his son came up and said, "Dad, you just beat my wife and killed my unborn child. What the hell?" Ivan, in a fit of rage, took his staff and then killed his son. So he killed his son and his heir and his unborn heir all within a period of a couple of days. He did have a younger son who was not 100% mentally sound. And when he died, the Ivan's family line died with them. So Russia went through a time of troubles, and the Romanovs came into power. And basically, the Romanovs, or a relation of the Romanovs, ruled Russia up until the revolution in the early 1900s. So Russia, because of that Mongol domination, was constantly behind the rest of Western Europe. You have to remember all their extra money went to tribute to the Mongols. Now, if the Mongols didn't truly get out into the late 15th century, early 16th century, that's the same time period that Western Europe is exploring. They had already gone through their Renaissance. They're exploring, they're building overseas colonies, they're making money. And Russia is just gaining its independence. So it was really far behind the rest of Western Europe. This is all I just said, right? Western Europe was in the Renaissance, Russia had to unify and get organized. So this handsome fella, Peter the Great, he ruled Russia from 1672 to 1725, and he became Tsar at the age of 10. Again, it's not that he got absolute power at the age of 10. He had advisors and such guiding him, making most of the decisions for him. I mean, I just can't imagine what grade are you when you're 10? Fifth grader? Imagine a fifth grader having absolute power. And he went into Western Europe and studied Western technology. He visited several European cities. He went to the Netherlands. I believe he went to Norway, France, and he brought back the best of what these European cities had to offer. Technicians, teachers, soldiers, oopsies. And, why would these people move back to really cold and sometimes inhospitable Russia? Money. He said basically, I will pay you up to 5 times what you currently make to come back to Russia and help me westernize my country. So we are very motivated by money, and people took and accepted his offerings. But, and again, with absolute power, he could easily fund this. Another thing that he did, which is evident here, right? You have Rasputin, and you may know him as Rasputin from the movie Anastasia. And we'll talk about him definitely during the Russian Revolution. He's actually got a very big role in that. If you look at what he has compared to what Peter doesn't have, Rasputin has a beard. Peter doesn't. Now, Rasputin lived in the early 20th century in Russia. Peter, clearly was governing a lot earlier. But beards were really important to the Russian people. They were part of the Orthodox religion. That's why Rasputin here has such a long one. He was a monk. And it was a big part of their culture and their identity. And Peter, after getting back from Western Europe, said, hey guys, no one in Western Europe has these crazy massive beards. So I need to have you guys look more westernized, so no more beards. And what he instituted was a beard tax. Okay, so he instituted a beard tax. He encouraged, and by encouraged I mean forced, the Russians to dress like Western Europeans. And if you can't pay the tax, your beard comes off. If you could pay the tax, your beard stays on. But if you were wealthy enough, right, if you were a boyar and you could afford to pay that tax, right? Remember, boyars are wealthy landowning nobles in Russia. You didn't want to pay the tax because if you didn't shave your beard, then Peter would be like, why are you not listening to me? That's not cool. Don't forget, I have absolute power. So he really forces them to shave their beards. And you might be thinking that's not such a big deal. I would be delighted because we all know how I feel about facial hair. But having these Russian men shave their beards would be like me saying to you, okay, ladies, you want to pass my class? Or, hey, Mrs. Villegas' ladies, you want to pass her class? You have to shave your head. Bald. Shave your head bald. No hair. Bicked. Bick your head. That's the only way to pass this class. Most of you then would choose to fail. You would say, absolutely not. I'm not shaving, our hair is part of a huge part of our identity. And for me, it covers up a massive dent in the back of my head, which I'll be more than happy to let you feel. It's huge. I asked my mom if she dropped me when I was a baby. She said no. So I just have this massive dent. So, it's not just, you're not just messing with people's appearance, you're messing with their culture, you're messing with their identity, not just how they look. And that's an example of absolute power. He said, I'm instituting a beard tax, and nobody could say, Peter, don't forget, that's a big part of our culture. He didn't want to hear it. It was his ideas. This is what he wanted to do. So another thing that he did was he built St. Petersburg. See what he did there? Petersburg. He named a city after himself. And when you're an absolute ruler, you can totally do that. It's in northwestern Russia. It's near the Baltic Sea, and it's also referred to as the window to the west. The Baltic Sea is on a very western part of Russia, and this was like, Peter looking out to the west, seeing the west. He was all about the west. The only problem is that the Baltic Sea is very far north, and it's freaking freezing up there, and they needed a warm water port. Now, a warm water port does not mean you could swim in it in January. It means the sucker's not frozen in January. And the closest warm water port Russia had access to was on the Black Sea. But the Ottomans controlled that area during this time period, and Peter tried to get control over this territory, but he was unsuccessful. He did not add a warm water port to Russia. He did not do it. And then a quick review from last year. What is the narrow strait that connects the Black Sea to the Sea of Marmara? I'll give you a hint. It's prosperous. That's right, it's the Bosporus. Very good. Okay, so here's the Baltic Sea in the winter. It's completely frozen over. And I don't know the impact that global warming has on it currently, But I do know, historically speaking, the Baltic Sea was frozen 6 months out of the year. You can't trade if you can't use ships to trade if your main port is frozen 6 months out of the year. Currently, I'm sure it's probably frozen at least a couple months out of the year because, again, it's really freaking cold up there. One of the things, if it's in that purple color, by the way, you don't have to write it down. One of the things that Peter did was extend serfdom. He extended it. He further bounded the serfs to the land. So they didn't have freedoms. They couldn't leave the land. They were bound to that land. They had to work the boyars' land. And he did that so the boyars had the time to serve the government. And even though Western Europe, serfdom ended and died out with things like the Crusades and the 100 Years' War, that was a couple hundred years before the reign of Peter. He said, look, I need the boyars in Moscow helping me westernize this country. I need the serfs back on the land, making sure that we have a food supply. Because that's the thing about Russia's growing season. It's really short. They're so far north that they don't have a huge growing season. In order to maintain that surplus amount of food, they needed all hands on deck. So Peter made sure that the boyars had a labor force. And sadly, he heavily taxed and he exploited his own people. Yes, he westernized. Yes, he tried to bring Russia, catch them up to Western Europe, but he did it at the expense of his own people. So it's up to you to judge whether or not it was worth it. I'm still on the fence about it because so many hardships happened to his people under his reign. They remained uneducated. They remained poor. They didn't get their basic needs met on a regular basis. Then enters this woman. Now she is a handsome woman, and her name is Catherine the Great. She ruled from 1762 to 1796, and she, like Peter, was all about westernization. She exempted the boyars from paying taxes. Now they're the people who had the money. And she said, no, I'm not going to make you pay taxes, and this way you will then take that money and invest it in new things. But quite honestly, we all know the trickle-down theory does not work at all, not even a little bit. Despite people's best efforts to say, yes, but it will work. It has yet to work. Historically speaking, it has yet to show that it can be effective. While she was ruling Russia, more peasants, again, were forced into serfdom. She further bound them to the land to guarantee that labor force to help, make the boyars money and keep them loyal to her. Funny story about her, she wasn't Russian. She was a German princess who married a Russian czar, and she had him killed, actually, so she could be Tsarina all on her own. And, like I talked about Elizabeth last year, our historical whores, she was totally a historical whore. There used to be a rumor, and I'm sure it's still out there, but most people know now that's not true. There used to be a rumor that she died trying to have sex with a horse, and the horse collapsed on her, but that's not true. She actually died going to the bathroom. Common way to go, believe it or not, when you're older. But the cool thing about her is she gained access to that warm water port in the Black Sea. And that's what you really have to know about her. Okay, so she gained access to trading routes on the Black Sea. So that's what makes her super special. And it looks like I'm going to have to start another segment to do this part. I thought I'd be able to finish it all in one. But you know me and my storytelling. Once I start, I just can't stop. So, to be continued.